My name is Olivia. I'm 25 now. But the night my life split in two, I was 17, sitting at the end of our polished oak dining table trying to make myself as small and quiet as the extra fork no one used. My mom had decided to throw what she called a milestone celebration dinner because my dad's company had just hit some revenue target and my younger brother had gotten into an expensive private school. I'd been accepted into a state college with a partial scholarship, but that didn't earn a banner over the fireplace, so my news sat folded in my pocket like a secret no one asked for. The house buzzed with adults in designer clothes holding tall glasses, talking about investments and vacations. My job was to refill wine and collect plates. Mom moved through the room like a hostess in a commercial, kissing cheeks, laughing too loudly, always one joke away from mean. She wasn't drunk yet, but I knew the signs. The way her hand stayed a beat too long on someone's arm, the way her smile sharpened at the edges. Dad kept checking his phone for congratulatory emails, laughing a little too hard at every compliment. They were performing success, and I was the misprint in the brochure. Halfway through dessert, Mom clinked her glass for attention. The room hushed, cameras came out, everyone expecting another speech about how hard they'd worked to build this life. She stood behind my chair, fingers resting on my shoulders like claws disguised as a hug. "I just have to show you all our pride and joy," she announced. My stomach tightened. "This," she said, giving me a little shake, "is our daughter." She paused, let the anticipation build, eyes glittering. "Our family mistake." For a second, no one moved. Then someone snorted. Then the laughter rolled across the table like a wave. Phones lifted higher. A flash went off. My dad pointed his fork at me and added, "She's the 1% we wish we could write off." More laughter. Someone actually wiped tears from their eyes from how funny it was to call a teenage girl a mistake in her own home. I heard my heart pounding in my ears, louder than the jokes. I stared at the tablecloth, at the red wine ring someone had left near my plate, and I realized this wasn't new. It was just the first time they'd said it so clearly, with an audience. All the, "what would we do without our little accident?" The, "we weren't planning on you, but here you are." The way family friends would tilt their heads and ask, "So what's your plan, Olivia?" Like anything I said would be a punchline. They'd been rehearsing for this moment for years. I pushed my chair back. The legs scraped the hardwood, cutting through the laughter. Mom's fingers tightened on my shoulders. "Oh, come on, Liv. Don't be so sensitive, it's a joke," she said, voice dripping with mock concern. Dad smirked over the rim of his glass. "You know we love you," he added, as if love and public humiliation could share the same sentence. I stood up anyway. "I'm not laughing," I said, my voice steady in a way that surprised even me. A few guests shifted uncomfortably, but no one said anything. I walked out of the dining room, up the stairs past framed photos where I was always slightly out of focus, into my room that had never really felt like mine. I didn't slam the door. I moved quickly, mechanically. Backpack. A few shirts, jeans, underwear. My sketchbook. The $42 I'd been hiding in a shoebox for someday. Apparently, someday was tonight. When I came back down, the noise had picked up again. The story already being retold. My hurt edited into, "She's such a drama queen." I stepped into the doorway. Conversations faltered. Eyes turned. I walked to the table, set my house key down next to the expensive bottle of wine Mom had been bragging about, and looked straight at them. "You're going to regret saying that out loud," I said. No shouting, no tears. Just a promise. Mom's face twisted with annoyance, not fear. "Don't be ridiculous. Where do you think you're going to go?" Dad chuckled. "You'll cool off and be back by morning," he said, already dismissing me, already reaching for the breadbasket. I turned, opened the front door, and stepped into the humid night with a backpack, $42, and a label I refused to carry one more minute. I didn't know where I was going, only that I was done being the joke that held their perfect story together. 8 years later, when they were broke, desperate, and standing on my doorstep with red eyes and shaking hands, I remembered every second of that walk into the dark, and I made them remember it too. Back then, they laughed as the door closed behind me. They had no idea that was the night their golden life started to crack. The bus station smelled like burned coffee and bleach, but to me, it smelled like freedom. I bought the furthest ticket my $42 could reach. New Orleans, one way, no plan. The clerk didn't look twice at the teenage girl with the overstuffed backpack. On the overnight ride, the lights flickered. Someone snored behind me, and my phone lit up with messages. Mom, come back down and stop embarrassing us. Dad, we'll talk in the morning, don't do anything stupid. A few relatives added, they didn't mean it. And, you know how your parents joke. Not one person asked if I was okay. I turned the phone off and pressed my forehead to the window, watching the dark slide by and wondering what exactly I was, now that I wasn't willing to be their mistake anymore. By the time the bus rolled into New Orleans, my money was down to loose bills and coins. The city hit me all at once. Heat like a wet blanket. Horns, voices, music bleeding from open doors. It was chaos, but it was honest chaos. No one here cared who my parents were. I found the cheapest hostel with a vacancy, paid for 3 nights, and lay on the top bunk staring at the ceiling fan wobbling overhead. 72 hours to figure out how not to sink. The next morning, I walked until my feet blistered following help wanted signs. Most places shook their heads. We need someone with experience. We're not hiring minors. Come back with a resume. By late afternoon, hunger gnawed at my stomach, and my pride was running on fumes. I pushed open the door to a corner diner more out of desperation than hope. Inside, cracked red booths, chrome stools, the smell of frying oil. A guy about my age slid past me carrying 3 plates, calling orders. Behind the counter, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes was ringing up customers. I walked up, cleared my throat, and said, "Are you hiring?" She looked me over, taking in my cheap sneakers and the way I swayed from exhaustion. "You ever wait tables?" "No," I admitted, "but I learn fast. I need work. I'll take any shifts you have." The guy with the plates glanced over, smirked, and said, "She's got that no backup plan energy. That's useful." The woman snorted. "We pay minimum plus tips. It's not glamorous." "Neither is the bus station," I said. For the first time in 24 hours, someone laughed with me, not at me. She tossed me an apron. "Name's Carla. Start with clearing tables. If you survive the lunch rush, we'll talk." I survived. I spilled 1 soda, mixed up 2 orders, and almost cried when a customer snapped their fingers at me. But I also felt something I'd never felt at home. Every plate I carried mattered. My effort translated into cash I could fold into my pocket, not into some vague idea of family pride. The guy with the plates introduced himself during a lull. "I'm Sam," he said. "So, what did you run from?" The question was so blunt I almost dropped the tray. "Who says I ran?" He raised an eyebrow. "You move like someone who's afraid standing still will get her killed." I didn't answer, but he wasn't wrong. Over the next weeks, the diner became my anchor. Mornings behind the counter, afternoons napping in the hostel, nights sketching designs in my notebook under the dim light of the bunk. On my days off, I sat in a park and drew people's outfits, the linen of tourists, the sharp blazers of businesswomen, the layered chaos of street performers. Fabric was the only language that had ever made sense to me. It was the one place I could rewrite a body's story, give it armor where there had been exposed nerves. One night after closing, I stayed to help Sam stack chairs. He noticed the notebook peeking out of my bag. "You draw?" he asked. I design, I said. He flipped through the pages and let out a low whistle. You did these? These don't look like a mistake, Olivia. The word mistake hit like a slap and a hug. I hadn't told him my parents' favorite label, but somehow he'd stepped right on the bruise. Carla overheard. Design, huh? There's a community college not far from here with a fashion program. My niece went there. You should look into it. College sounded impossible. Money, time, applications. Those were things kids with safety nets worried about, not girls counting tips in crumpled bills. But that night, I borrowed the hostel computer and looked it up. Tuition, deadlines, scholarship forms, requirements. It felt like staring up at a building with no elevator and being told to fly. Still, I applied. I wrote an essay about growing up as the wrong puzzle piece in a picture-perfect family. I attached photos of my designs, the only proof I had that I could turn humiliation into something wearable. I hit submit with shaking fingers, then went to my shift like nothing had changed. Weeks later, an email arrived. I opened it in the break room, hands greasy from fries. We are pleased to inform you. I read the sentence 3 times. I'd been accepted, with enough financial aid that, if I kept working, I could scrape by. Sam whooped so loudly Carla threatened to fire him if he didn't calm down. You're in, Liv, he said, grabbing me in a quick hug. You're actually doing it. College didn't magically fix anything. I was still the girl who'd left home with $42 and a backpack. I still shared a room with strangers and counted coins at the end of the week. But for the first time, I wasn't just running from the house where they'd branded me a mistake. I was running toward a life that had room for all the parts of me they never bothered to see. Sometimes, on the bus ride home from late classes, I imagined the version of me who had stayed at that dining table, laughing along at the joke. She looked smaller and smaller every time I pictured her, until she barely felt real. From the outside, the fashion program looked like a dream. Mannequins in the lobby, framed photos of past winners, but inside it was a pressure cooker. Half my classmates had grown up with private sewing lessons and parents who funded their creative journeys. I had a binder of sketches done between shifts at the diner and fabric scraps begged from clearance bins. On the first critique day, I pinned a deconstructed blazer to the wall, seams exposed on purpose. It was the closest I'd ever come to drawing how it felt to sit at the edge of a family that never fully claimed me. The professor studied it, lips pursed. Pretty, she said at last, but safe. It looks like you pulled back right when it was getting interesting. Were you afraid to offend someone? The class chuckled. Safe. Afraid. Offend. She had no idea how accurately she'd named the life I'd been handed. That night, I fell asleep over my sketchbook and dreamed I was back at the dining table. My designs were taped to the walls. Mom clinked her glass. This is our daughter, she announced. Our second mistake. Dad pointed at my work. 1% talent, 99% disappointment. I woke with my heart racing. The next day, I spread my sketches on a cafeteria table, half tempted to tear them up. Rachel dropped into the chair opposite me. I knew her by sight. Dark curls, red lipstick, always carrying a sketchbook. You look like you're about to murder that paper, she said. My professor thinks my designs are safe, I muttered. She's wrong, Rachel said after flipping through a few pages. These aren't safe. They're furious. Good. Stop sanding the edges down because you're scared someone will flinch. There was no pity in her voice, only challenge. Between Rachel at school and Sam at the diner, I finally had something like a real support system. Sam asked to see every new sketch. Rachel dragged me to gallery shows and kept repeating one line, "Art that makes people comfortable rarely changes anything." Mid-semester, the department announced a citywide design competition sponsored by a big-name fashion house. Cash prize, internship, press. The entry required a small collection around a theme. My classmates buzzed about trends. I went home and stared at a blank page. I knew what my theme really was, but it felt dangerous to say it even in my own head. What it means to be told you're a mistake and live anyway. Eventually, I stopped pretending and leaned in. I sketched jackets that looked like armor, with deliberate scars of stitching where other designers would hide their seams. Dresses cut to move like someone walking away from a house on fire. A suit that seemed clean from the outside but hid text embroidered inside the lining where only the wearer would feel it. Every time I second-guessed myself, Rachel said, "If they're uncomfortable, good." Every time I wanted to quit, Sam shoved a to-go cup into my hand and said, "You didn't leave home to play it safe now." It wasn't glamorous. I broke needles, remade pieces, juggled shifts, skipped sleep. But slowly, the collection took shape. The last piece I finished was the black suit. Inside the jacket, in metallic thread where no one on the outside could see, I stitched 3 words. Not your mistake. When I knotted the final thread, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. On submission day, I turned in the collection and pretended I didn't care about the results. I told myself just finishing was the win. But every time my phone buzzed after that, my heart jumped. A month later, while I was rethreading a stubborn machine in the studio, my phone lit up with a number from my hometown area code. I almost let it go. Curiosity won. "Hello?" I said. There was a pause, then a voice I hadn't heard in years, deeper now, but unmistakable. "Liv?" My chest tightened. Ryan. My little brother. The kid they'd wrapped in bubble wrap while I took the hits. "Yeah," he said, voice rough. "Got your number from Aunt Jenna." My brain raced through scenarios. "What's going on?" I asked. He let out a humorless laugh. "It's bad. Mom and Dad, they've screwed up, Liv. The business is gone. Like, really gone. Debts? The bank coming for the house? People they used to show off for ignoring them." I sank onto a stool, staring at the fabric in my hands. "And?" I said. "What does that have to do with me?" He hesitated. "They need help. Real help. And you're doing well, right? College, job, that design thing. People keep sending me your work. You're the one everyone's proud of now." The irony was so sharp I almost laughed. The family mistake had become the functional adult while the perfect parents drowned in their own choices. "They're begging you to come home," Ryan said quietly. "They said they were wrong about you, that they should have treated you better. They think you can fix this." Silence stretched between us. 8 years earlier, they'd joked about writing me off. Now I was suddenly an asset. "Liv?" he asked. "Will you at least come hear them out, please? I don't know what to do." I looked at the black suit hanging from the rack, the metallic words hidden inside the lining. Not your mistake. For the first time, the label they'd given me wasn't the one that mattered. Buried under the old hurt, something colder settled in. The knowledge that this time, I held the power. The question was, what I was going to do with it. I drove back to my hometown like I was heading to a crime scene. The closer I got, the more the scenery looked the same. Gas stations, the faded billboard welcoming visitors. But my chest tightened. I parked a block away from my parents' house and walked the rest, giving myself one last chance to turn around. The house that had been the backdrop of every perfect family photo looked smaller. The lawn was overgrown, paint peeling from the porch railing, a foreclosure notice taped crookedly to the front door. For years, this place had been their favorite prop. Now it looked like a set nobody bothered to strike after the show closed. I rang the bell. My mom opened the door. For a second, we just stared. Linda had always been meticulous, hair blown out, makeup done before she took the trash out. Now her hair was scraped back, mascara smudged beneath red-rimmed eyes. "Olivia," she breathed, like my name might break. Her gaze flicked over my simple dress, the scuffed boots, the posture that no longer folded on command. "Hi, Mom," I said. The word felt strange. She stepped aside. "Come in." The house smelled stale. The citrus candles and expensive food smells were gone. Piles of unopened mail cluttered the console table. A framed photo of that milestone dinner still sat on a shelf. I was in it, blurred in the background, half turned away. My dad stood in the living room, thinner, his tie loosened, shoulders slumped. David had always filled space. Now he looked like the room was swallowing him. "You came," he said, as if he hadn't expected it. "You asked," I replied. "I was curious what the end of the world looks like from your side of town." We sat in the living room where I'd once been lectured about gratitude. Ryan leaned against the doorway, older and more tired than a 19-year-old should be. He gave me a small, guilty smile. I nodded back. He'd made the call, that mattered. "So," I said, "what happened?" For a moment, no one spoke. Then the story spilled out. Bad investments dressed up as opportunities, loans taken to cover previous loans, money shuffled to keep up the illusion of success. Dad's company had been bleeding for years. Instead of scaling back, they'd doubled down. There were lawsuits now. Creditors. Friends sending cold emails instead of congratulations. "We thought we could fix it before anyone noticed," Mom said, twisting a tissue. "We always fix things." "You hid it," I said. "From everyone. Including me." She flinched. "We didn't want you to worry." I laughed, short and sharp. "You had no problem letting me worry about whether I even belonged in this family. But sure, protect me from the bank statements." Mom's eyes filled. "We made mistakes," she whispered. "You didn't make mistakes," I said. "You branded me as one. You turned me into a joke you could tell over dessert." Dad rubbed his forehead. "We were joking, Liv. That night, it got out of hand. But we never meant—" "You meant it enough to say it," I cut in. "You meant it enough that people still quote you." His head snapped up. "What do you mean, still?" I hesitated, then shrugged. "Someone filmed you calling me the family mistake. It's online. People I've never met have watched you laugh at your kid." Mom's hand flew to her mouth. "No," she whispered. "That was a private dinner." "Nothing's private when you perform cruelty for an audience," I said. Silence settled. Ryan stared at the carpet. I didn't know it was that bad," he muttered. "It was," I said. "And now you want something from me. So say it." Dad straightened. "We're going to lose the house," he said. "The business is finished. We've remortgaged everything. Your college fund—" He broke off. I already knew, but wanted to hear it. "My college fund what?" "We used it," he said. "We thought we could pay it back before you needed it. We were wrong. Then you left. We assumed you wouldn't become anything." He didn't have to finish. Mom reached for my hand, then stopped. "We're not asking for a handout," she said automatically. "We just need a bridge, someone to help us get back on our feet. You're successful now. People talk about your designs. You could help us restructure, maybe lend." "So now I'm useful," I said. "Now that the golden facade cracked, suddenly the family mistake looks like an asset." "It's not like that," she protested. "It's exactly like that," I said. 8 years ago, you asked what you'd do without me and laughed. Now you're finding out." Dad's composure slipped. "We're scared, Olivia," he said, voice low. "We're going to lose everything." I looked around at the expensive furniture, the heavy curtains, the framed certificates with their names in gold. Everything they'd worshipped, everything they'd chosen over treating me like a person. "You're wrong," I said quietly. "You're not going to lose everything. You already did." You lost me. The words hung there. Mom sobbed. Ryan swallowed hard. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the smallest person in the room. I felt like the only one seeing clearly. And I hadn't even decided yet whether I'd help them or let them watch the rest of it burn. On the drive back to my motel, their faces replayed in my mind, not as untouchable giants, but as two people who had finally run out of places to hide. For once, I was the one being chased, and they were the ones waiting to see if I would show mercy. The next day, I came back with a notebook full of numbers. If I was going to decide anything, I needed facts, not just the satisfaction of watching them squirm. We spread bank statements and legal notices across the same dining table where they'd once passed dessert and insults. The table looked better buried in truth. Their situation was worse than I'd thought. Multiple mortgages, maxed out cards, personal guarantees on loans that had gone bad. One line made my jaw tighten. Education fund, liquidated. That was supposed to be mine, I said. Dad didn't bother sugarcoating. We thought the next quarter would turn things around. When it didn't, we kept moving money. We told ourselves we'd fix it before it mattered. Mom added, "You've always been resourceful. We knew you'd land on your feet." As if robbing me had been a compliment. Before I could answer, the doorbell rang. Mom jumped. "We're not expecting anyone," she said. Dad's face went tight, like he was bracing for another creditor. I stood. "Relax. I'm not the one hiding." I opened the door. Kira stood on the porch, metal rings in her ears catching the light. She'd been my classmate in an early design elective, the one who'd once joked, "If my parents called me a mistake, I'd put it on a t-shirt and retire." Now she raised an eyebrow. "You ghost my texts, your location disappears, and then it pops up here?" she said. "I figured either you'd been kidnapped or you finally came to see the people who broke you." "Option 2, I said. "Come in." She looked around the hallway, taking in the peeling paint and stacks of envelopes. "So this is the palace," she murmured. Mom appeared, dish towel in hand, eyes wary. "We're in the middle of a family discussion," she said. "This is private." Kira tilted her head. "Is it?" She pulled out her phone, tapped, then turned the screen toward my parents. The video played. Mom's voice over clinking cutlery. "This is our daughter. The family mistake." Dad's follow-up. The roar of laughter. Underneath, thousands of comments calling them exactly what they were. Mom's face went gray. Dad lurched to his feet. "Where did you get that?" he demanded. "It's everywhere," Kira said. "Forums, reaction videos, can you believe these people compilations? You're a cautionary tale." Dad's anger snapped free. "People don't know the context," he said. "They don't know our family. One clip and suddenly we're monsters." I stepped between him and Kira. "You gave them the clip," I said. "That was you without filters. You thought no one outside this room would ever see it." "You were wrong." Mom sank into a chair. "We never meant for it to hurt you like this," she whispered. "It was just a joke?" Kira cut in. "Funny how the people laughing never seem to be the punchline." She slipped her phone away and looked at me. "You okay?" It was the only time anyone in this house had asked me that without an agenda. Ryan stared at the table. "I saw the video last year," he admitted quietly. "I told myself it had to be edited. I didn't want to believe it. Seeing it like that." He shook his head. "I should have said something sooner." I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "You were a kid," I said. "They were the adults." I turned back to my parents. "Here's the problem," I said. "You talk about this like you made mistakes, and everything else was fine. But this," I gestured at the video in Kira's hand, "is who you are when you're comfortable. You turned your own kid into entertainment. You drained my college fund to keep the show going. and now you want me to help you rebuild the stage. Dad's shoulders dropped. You're right, he said slowly. The words sounded like gravel. So what happens now? Do you walk away and let the internet finish us? Ruin what's left of our name? He was finally saying the quiet part out loud. He was more afraid of humiliation than losing the house. For a heartbeat, I pictured it. A thread where I laid everything out. Interviews, headlines, their faces plastered under the word abusive. It would be easy. It would feel good. And then, it would be over. They'd still find ways to make themselves victims in their own story. That would be too simple, I said. If I help you at all, it won't be to restore what you had. That version of your life is dead. What we're talking about now is whether you're willing to live with the kind of accountability you were happy to dodge when you were on top. Kira leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, watching them with the detached focus of someone studying a case study. Accountability, she repeated. That's a word the internet loves. Question is, can you handle it when it doesn't come with a like button and a share count? We moved back to the living room, but the roles had flipped. This wasn't parents lecturing a child anymore. It felt like a hearing, and I was the one asking questions. Kira sat on the arm of a chair, silent but present, like a witness. Before we talk numbers, I said, we talk terms. Not financial, personal. Dad frowned. What does that mean? It means you stop acting like I owe you my life because you fed me and put a roof over my head, I said. That's the minimum for having a kid, not a debt I have to repay. Mom flinched. We never? You reminded me every time I didn't perform the way you wanted. I cut in. After everything we do for you, every story about how you sacrificed your dreams because of me. You turned my existence into something I was supposed to apologize for. Dad's jaw tightened. Fine, he said. You want us to admit we handled things badly. We did. No, I said. I want you to understand there are consequences. If I help, it's not a rescue. It's a contract. You get survival, not status. You will sell what you can. Move somewhere smaller. Get regular jobs. No more show. Mom stared. What kind of jobs? The kind most people work, I said. Retail, office, whatever you can get without lying. Dad's mouth twisted. So we're supposed to accept being nobodies after everything we built? You're not nobodies, I answered. You're people living at your real size instead of the inflated version you performed. That's not punishment. That's reality. Kira let out a quiet, yep. Mom wiped her cheeks. And in return? I can cover enough high-interest debt to keep you from the street, I said. Help you talk to a real financial counselor, but only under conditions. Dad leaned forward. Name them. First, I said, you apologize, publicly. Not just to me in this room, to the people you lied to and borrowed from, and about me specifically. You say my name without a punchline and you state you were wrong. Mom's eyes widened. You want us to humiliate ourselves? You already did that, I said. I'm saying you stop pretending it was harmless. Dad shook his head. People have made up their minds from that video. What good would an apology do? It's not for them, I replied. It's for the version of you that isn't hiding. Either you want to be different or you want a better mask. The apology draws that line. Mom swallowed. What else? Therapy, I said. Real therapy, individually and together. And you don't drag me there as a prop. You go because you're finally curious why you thought treating your daughter like a joke was acceptable. We're not crazy, Dad muttered. I didn't say you were, I answered. I'm saying you're dangerous until you figure yourselves out. You want access to me? You prove you're not the same people I walked away from. Ryan nodded slowly. That seems fair, he said. Mom looked at me, eyes raw. If we do this, do we get you back? Our daughter? I took a breath. No, You don't do these things to win me like a prize. You do them because it's the bare minimum. If, after a long time, I decide to let you into my life more, that'll be my choice, not a reward you can cash in." Her shoulders sagged. For once, she didn't argue. "And if we say no?" Dad asked. "If we can't agree to all of that?" "Then you live with what you built," I said. "Bankruptcy, foreclosure, whatever comes next. I dealt with the fallout of your choices for 17 years. You can deal with your own." The wall clock ticked loudly in the quiet. Finally, Dad exhaled. "We'll do it," he said. "If you help us not end up homeless, we'll do the rest." Mom nodded, tears spilling. "I'll apologize," she whispered. "I just don't know how to be anyone other than who I pretended to be." "For what it's worth," Kira said, "most decent people are just who they are all the time. You'll catch up." I pulled a folded document from my bag and set it on the coffee table. "This is a draft agreement," I said. "Basic terms. I'm not handing over money on a promise. If we go forward, it's in writing." Dad picked it up, eyes scanning clauses about limited support, sale of luxury assets, public statements, therapy, boundaries about contact. "You came prepared," he said, surprise edging into his voice. "You really have become someone." "I always was," I said. "You just didn't like the version that didn't make you look good." He let the papers fall back to the table. "If we sign this and keep our side, do you think you'll ever forgive us?" Mom held her breath. I thought about the girl with the backpack and $42, about sewing until my fingers cramped because I refused to be what they'd named me. "Forgiveness isn't a payment plan," I said. "You might get it one day. You might not. Either way, you don't get to use it as a bargaining chip. What you get, if you're lucky, is a chance to be better people than you've been. What you've already lost is the right to script my role in your story." Kira met my eyes and gave a small nod. Revenge, I realized, didn't have to mean destroying them in one dramatic move. It could look like this: a contract, clear lines, a life where the power they held over me finally had an expiration date in black and white. In the end, they signed. After a few last-minute calls to lawyers and one meltdown about airing dirty laundry, the pen still met the paper. The fallout came fast: foreclosure, cars sold, the vacation timeshare gone with a few strokes of a pen. They left the neighborhood they'd treated like a stage and moved into a small rental on the edge of town, the kind of place they used to describe as where people who don't plan ahead end up. Now they were those people. I kept my side of the agreement, paid enough of the worst debt to keep them out of the car, hired a financial counselor, then stepped back. They had to make the hard calls themselves, canceling services, taking whatever work they could get, learning how much groceries cost when you aren't throwing parties. The public apology happened in a community center room that smelled faintly of bleach. A few dozen locals showed up. More watched online. I streamed it from my apartment in New Orleans, the black suit hanging behind me like a shadow. Mom spoke first. "Years ago," she said, "I called my own daughter the family mistake. I thought I was being clever. I was being cruel." She looked at the camera. "Olivia, I'm sorry. Not just for that night, but for every time I used you as a joke." Dad followed, admitting he'd made me the punchline of their success story and treated my feelings like collateral damage. The chat filled with people doubting them, praising them, dragging them. That noise wasn't mine to manage. The apology was their starting line, not my closure. While their lives shrank down, mine grew. The collection I'd submitted won second place. Enough money to breathe, and an internship offer I leveraged into something better. With visibility from the contest, I launched a small brand built around what had kept me upright. Sharp lines, visible seams, hidden messages for the wearer. I called the first collection 1%. Sam handled logistics, Rachel branding, Kira social media. Meanwhile, my parents clocked into jobs with name tags. Mom folded clothes in a mid-range store. Dad processed paperwork at a small office. Their old circle quietly stopped inviting them to anything. They weren't pariahs. They were invisible. For two people who'd built their identity on being impressive, that was a slow, steady punishment. The twist came a year later when the bank finally moved to auction off the house. I flew in, sat at the back of the room, and raised my paddle at the right moment. The house sold for a fraction of what my parents once bragged it was worth. The deed ended up in my name. "You said you wouldn't save the house," Dad said when I told them. "I didn't," I answered. "I bought a building. What it's for now is my choice." We stripped it. The dining room where they'd humiliated me became an open studio space. Upstairs bedrooms turned into small classrooms and workrooms. Using prize money and brand profits, I opened a nonprofit there. Sewing classes, portfolio help, small grants for kids who'd been written off as problems, wastes, mistakes. On the front door, in clean metal letters, we mounted a sign, "The Not a Mistake Project." Underneath, smaller text read, "For anyone who was ever told they were the problem." The first time my parents visited, they stood on the sidewalk staring at the sign. They'd asked if they could see the house one last time. I let them. Inside, the place was unrecognizable. Mismatched chairs, mood boards on the walls, teenagers in thrifted clothes arguing about color palettes. Mom paused in what used to be my bedroom, now lined with sewing machines. A girl with purple hair hunched over a jacket, tongue sticking out in concentration. "Do they know everything?" Mom asked. "They know enough," I said. "They don't need my worst memories to benefit from my best choices." In the former dining room, I'd left one thing, the old light fixture overhead. No long table, no head seat, just a circle of chairs and a whiteboard covered in ideas. Dad looked around. "You really erased us," he said. "No," I replied. "I outgrew you. There's a difference." He swallowed. "We're trying," he said. "Therapy. Work. No more jokes like that." "Good," I answered. "That's about who you are now. This place isn't about you at all. We're not some neatly healed family. Some holidays I answer their calls. Some I don't. Dad's health isn't great after the stress. Mom hates crowds, suddenly aware that any stranger's phone could be pointed at her. They live in a small apartment. Budget for bills. Watch sales. That's their life. They built it, brick by brick. Mine is loud and real. I spend my days fitting jackets on kids who thought they'd never put their names on anything worth keeping, and my nights sketching new ways to turn ugly words into armor. Sometimes, when I lock up the old house, I run my fingers over the metal letters on the door and remember the scrape of my chair against the floor the night I walked out. People say revenge is about destroying the people who hurt you. For me, it was about destroying the version of myself who still needed their approval and building something they couldn't enter on their own terms. So I'll leave you with the question that still lives at the edge of my thoughts. If the people who broke you showed up years later, crying and begging you to save them, would you open the door? And if you did, whose rules would you finally live by?